everybody, Dr. K here. Today I'm going to be walking you through a workshop to start drafting your rhetorical bibliography, and I think this workshop is going to be extremely helpful for you in terms of putting the project together. Now before we start this workshop, you'll need to have read and taken notes on at least 2 of your academic sources. Okay, that's the preparation for today. So make sure you have that complete. Also make sure you have a copy of your research log on hand. That's the research log that you completed last class during the library workshop. So before we get started, I wanted to just do an overview of the assignment so we make sure we're all on track and we know exactly what we're doing. This evaluative annotated bibliography is worth 15% of your final grade, and you're going to produce a bibliography that collects, summarizes, and explains the best secondary sources, 3 or more, you need at least 3, that are available on your narrowed topic. Your bibliography will, 1, summarize your source, 2, explain its rhetorical context, and we're going to talk about that in this workshop today, and 3, articulate the ways your source helps you understand your research topic and all of its complexity. Your bibliography should contain 3 or more sources, each with a correct citation in MLA format, which you learned how to do last class in the library module. You need a paragraph telling the reader the main argument and main points of your article, a description of the rhetorical context, a discussion of why you chose this article out of all the choices that were available on your topic, what it helps you to understand about your research topic. And finally, you need a discussion of how your article speaks to and compares with the other sources in your bibliography, how all 3 of your sources compare, and how they fit into the overall conversation about your topic. You're going to need to include copies of all your sources, and paper is obviously not an option this semester, so you're going to need to include electronic sources. Electronic versions of your sources. You should download the PDF versions from the library database and upload those to Canvas. As you remember from our class discussion before the break, the purpose of Project 3 is to slow down the research process and to focus on understanding both the individual sources and how the sources converse with each other. We're trying here to avoid some of the problems with research and source use that we saw in Project 2. So the process for this essay: 1, develop a narrowed research topic and focus research question, which you've done both before the break and in our first class period after the break. You need to find articles using library databases pertinent to your topic, which you did last class with the library module. You need to adapt your research topic based on early findings, which you also did last class based on your research at the library. And today we're going to be working on reading, evaluating, summarizing, interpreting, and describing sources, and drafting citations for peer review. It's really important to keep in mind how annotated bibliography will be graded. You're going to be graded just as much on the quality of the sources as you are on how you describe them in your writing. So here is, that's not very easy to see, but hopefully you can bear with me and see this well enough. You need to make sure that your sources are substantial in length and perspectives or in depth of research. They need to be secondary and scholarly rather than primary. They need to meet the evaluative criteria discussed in class. So they need to be recent, published by a reputable source, and written by an expert in the field. And they need to be on the same narrowed topic as other sources, but offering us a different approach or perspective on the topic. You don't want 3 sources that all say exactly the same thing about your topic. You want 3 sources that are on the same narrowed topic, but give us a slightly different perspective. And you'll see here that this is the grading rubric for 1 source. Half of the grade is going to come from the quality of the source itself. So what I'd like you to do now is choose one of the articles you found to work with for today, one that you read and took notes on. It's probably going to be your favorite article. That's probably where you should start, the best article that you found. And I want you to start thinking about the article's thesis. See if you can state the article's main idea in your own words. Without using quotes, try to paraphrase it, put it in your own words. Remember, the thesis isn't just the article's topic or subject matter, it's also what the article tells us about this topic. What is the article trying to communicate and say to us? And if you remember in Project 2, we were talking about how some of those articles that we were reading in class together Their main purpose was to report on a research study about some topic related to student source use. Some of the other ones were to propose a solution or to make an argument about student source use. So try to think about what your article's main purpose is. I would like you to pause now for about 5 minutes or however long it takes you to work through this prompt to start thinking about your article's thesis. The next thing we want to think about is the rhetorical context. So I'd like you to take a few minutes and look back at your article. What is the name of the journal, and who do you think reads this journal? I doubt it's an article that you would just come across in your daily use just for pleasure reading. It's probably an article, if it's a scholarly article, it's probably an article meant for experts in the field. So try to think about who is the audience of this journal. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the thesis and the purpose of the article. Is it trying to inform you, persuade you, argue something, make a call to action, defend some kind of approach? Is it trying to present research findings? What conversation or debate does it reference? What genre conventions does it follow? When we talk about genre conventions, we mean the kind of standard procedure that articles in a specific field follow. So if you're reading a scientific research study, there's almost always going to be a methods section that talks about the methods that the authors are following in their research study. Then there's going to be a results and a conclusion section. If you're reading a sociology article, oftentimes they're also going to have a kind of methodology to explain the process of their study. So try to see if the article that you're looking at follows some kind of traditional standard approach to its subject and how it's writing about its subject. You also want to think about how it's organized. Are there sections that it's organized into? Is there some kind of clear organizing strategy? So take a few minutes, pause this video, and think through answers to some of these questions. And just unpause it when you're ready to move on. The other thing I want you to think about really seriously when you're doing the rhetorical analysis of your article is the kind of evidence your article is using. So what kinds of things is it doing to support its argument? Does it have anecdotal evidence? And anecdotal means like stories. Is it telling stories about different people or situations? Does it have statistical evidence? So that would be numbers and data. Is it presenting statistics on the topic? Is it presenting a research study? It might be presenting firsthand experience. So if it's telling a story or an experience that the author has had him or herself, that's what we call firsthand experience. It might also be presenting field research. So it's possible that the writer went out and interviewed different people and discovered different things about this topic. So try to write down at least 3 pieces of evidence that your article uses in support of the thesis, and try to explain a little bit about how the evidence works. So you can use quotes here, but just make sure you cite them appropriately and make sure you have documentation if you choose to use them in your bibliography. So here's an example. This is from a novel we worked with 2 years ago here at Marymount, but it will do in terms of an example for us. Boo cites some of the files from the village of Vidarva to explain the suicides of farmers. In one of the files, a relative explains how one farmer couldn't afford to marry his second son, and people would keep asking when the marriage would happen. So you can see how there is a quote used here. You can see how it's integrated and cited with the page numbers, and the author's name is already in my sentence. But you can also see how I have taken a piece of evidence that's being used by this text, and I'm trying to explain a little bit about how it's being used. I've also tried to explain what kind of evidence this is. So the evidence comes from the files investigating the suicides of farmers. So I wanted to make sure that was clear to my readers what kind of evidence this was and how it was working. So I'd like you to do that for 3 different pieces of evidence from your article. Go ahead and pause the video, and when you're done finding and discussing 3 different pieces of evidence, you can go ahead and unpause and move on. The next issue is to think about the context of your project. I want you to think about why you chose this article out of all the choices that might have been available on your topic. and what it helps you understand about your research topic. So take a few minutes to write down some of your thoughts here, and you can pause this video while you work. And then I want you to think about the article's conclusion. If you can, paraphrase it in your own words. What is the article's overall conclusion about the topic? I'd also like you to think about your conclusions. Do you agree with the article? And what do you agree with that it says? Is there anything you disagree with in the article? And also think about questions that still remain in your mind after you read and reviewed this article. What kinds of things did it leave unanswered that you're still wondering about? So take a few minutes, pause the video, and work through your answers to these questions. So now we're going to go back through and work on a draft of the bibliography for our second source. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do now is pull out your second article, and I'd like you to work through the same thing. So think about this article's thesis. What is the thesis of your second article? See if you can state the main idea in your own words without quotes. Try to put it in your own words. And remember, we're thinking about not just the article's topic, it's also what is the article's take on this topic. What is the article trying to communicate about your topic? So go ahead and pause this video for about 5 minutes or however long it takes you to put into your own words the main ideas and overview of this article. Now let's work on the rhetorical context for your second article. So just as we did with the first one, we want to think about the journal and its audience. We want to think about the purpose of the article, and remember that the purpose might be to inform us of something. It might be to persuade us of an idea or to argue an approach. It might be trying to call us to action. You remember in Project 2, we had some of those articles that were trying to call teachers to action to get them to teach things differently. It might be trying to defend an idea or an approach, and it might also be trying to present research findings, as many of those Project 2 articles were. If the article is talking about its own research study, and it's talking about methodology and those kinds of things, it's probably presenting research findings. Is there a conversation or debate that it references? Do you see those genre conventions that we looked for in the first article? How is your article organized? Are there sections? Is there a clear organizing strategy? So go ahead and pause for a few minutes and work through your answers to these questions. And then we're going to think about evidence just as we did with the first article. I'd like you to do like we did with the first one. I'd like you to find at least 3 different pieces of evidence. And I want you to think about whether this evidence is anecdotal, like stories, whether it's statistical, it's from a research study, firsthand experience, field research, etc. I'd like you to think about what kind of evidence it is and how it works to help the author make the argument of the article. So go ahead, pause this. This should take you at least 5 minutes, maybe more like 10. Find 3 pieces of evidence and try to explain them clearly. And then we want to think about the context of the project, why you chose this article out of all the other choices you had available on your topic, what it helps you understand about your research topic. So pause here and take a few minutes to write down your thoughts about context. And then conclusions. So what is the article's conclusion? See if you can put it into your own words. And I also want to think about you to think about your conclusions about this article. What do you agree with or disagree with? And what questions do you still have after reading and reviewing this article? So pause here and take about 5 minutes to write down some answers to these questions. And the last thing we want to do here is start thinking about connections. So how do your 2 articles connect with each other? You're going to do this for all 3 of the articles in your final bibliography, but you've just got 2 that you've worked with today. So start thinking about how they connect with one another, how they fit the overall conversation about your topic. Do they offer us different perspectives on the same topic? Do they treat the topic in different ways? How so? Do they agree or disagree? And where? Try to be as specific as you can about the ways that your 2 articles connect. I'd also like for you to think here about whether you found additional sources that you don't plan to use in your bibliography. And I want you to think about why you selected these two sources instead of other sources that you might have chosen on your topic. So go ahead and pause here for at least 5 minutes, it might take you a little longer, to think about the connections between your articles and the reason that you selected these two. And finally, I want you to start thinking about some additional research you might need to do for your bibliography. Did you discover in the process of your research today or writing about your research today that there are some gaps or things that you don't yet know about your topic that you'd like to find out? Is there any information that would be really helpful to round out your bibliography and help shed light on your topic? So pause this video now, and come up with a list of 2 to 3 different kinds of sources you might want to search for. The other thing I want to do today with you in this video is think about drafting the reflection assignment. So you might remember, we're going to refresh our minds on the assignment here. Your research reflection is part of Project 3, and it needs to be 1 to 2 pages double-spaced. You're going to use your research log to reflect on your research experiences. You're going to reflect on your research strategies and what you found. You're going to need a working thesis statement. It doesn't have to be perfect or refined, but you need some kind of thesis statement on how your research process served you. You're going to need to reflect on your research process on the topic thus far and discuss your further research needs for Project 4. What were the most challenging parts of the process? Was it locating sources, narrowing the search, evaluating your sources, reading and understanding them? What worked well for you in your process that you might use again in another research project? And what has been less successful that you might want to do differently in the future? You can and should bring in ideas from Project 2 sources as they fit your circumstances. So remember, we talked about things like data smog, horizontal reading. We talked about writing from sources instead of writing from sentences. Any of those ideas would be really helpful to bring in this reflection. And a strong reflection paper is going to refer to ideas from at least one of these articles. So what I want you to do right now is to brainstorm for a few minutes. What were the most challenging parts of your research process? Locating sources, narrowing the search, evaluating sources, reading and understanding them. What has worked well in your process you might use again? What has been less successful you might want to change? And what connections did you see with sources from Project 2? Data smog, paraphrase and patch writing, writing from sentences or sources, understanding the purpose of an article, dealing with issues of plagiarism. So go ahead and brainstorm for about 5 minutes. You can pause this video and brainstorm some answers to these questions. Once you have your answers to this brainstorm, you can start thinking about a thesis for your reflection. What seems to be an overriding concern in your research process? What came out of your brainstorm as an issue that's something that's really important in your process? It could be something you do really well or something you really struggle with. And that might be a place for you to find a thesis for this reflection. Okay, thank you for working through this workshop with me today. And please don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you have any questions about this workshop or about Project 3 or anything else related to our class. So for next class, you have a draft of your Project 3 due. You need to have one of your sources, the annotation complete for one of your 3 sources, and we're going to be doing a peer review. So that annotation is just a draft. Don't forget, it's just a draft, but it is due at the beginning of class so that I can set up the peer review groups. If you have any questions, let me know.